This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. Well, what a great honor it is for me to be joined today by Tami Dixon and Jeffrey Carpenter, the award-winning co-founders of Bricolage Production Company, one of the most innovative and forward-thinking theater companies in the world, which just happens to be located here in our culturally rich city of Pittsburgh. While Tami is Bricolage's creative principal, Jeffrey is the company's artistic director. Tami specializes in creating intimate, personalized, and embodied immersive encounters. Jeffrey envisions theater not as a passive experience, but as a vehicle for heightened involvement for artist and audience alike. With Bricolage, Tami and Jeffrey have created numerous memorably unique immersive experiences, including Ojo, DODO, which was produced in collaboration with the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, in which the experience was set, and STRATA, which was named 2012's top production of the year by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and featured on the cover of American Theater magazine. Tami is the writer and director of The Forest of Everywhere, Bricolage's first immersive for children with developmental differences. She also co-created Bricolage's Immersive Encounters program, a bite-sized, sensory-based theatrical initiative developed as a laboratory for training immersive artists and experimenting with participatory storytelling. Jeffrey's work explores dynamic and deep modes of connectivity, placing each audience member at the center of the experience from which everything else spins. In this style, in 2018, he co-created The Clearing. Bricolage's layered works often utilize sensual, dreamlike environments to heighten awareness, stir memories, and promote deeper participation among audience goers. Together, they also produce, write, and direct the highly acclaimed and popular Midnight Radio series, now entering its 10th season. That's just the tip of the iceberg of all that has been offered up by Bricolage, and so it is for me a great delight to have Tami Dixon and Jeffrey Carpenter on StoryBeat today. Welcome to you both.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
What an introduction.
Thanks.
Your whole life story's just been laid out for you.
Wow, we're amazing.
It's a mashup. That's pretty great.
And you get a side of fries with that, right?
Please.
So tell us a little bit about your backgrounds. What caused you to ever get into this thing called theater? Where did this happen? How did this happen?
Well, I guess I'll go first.
Yeah.
Well, theater has been, I guess, in my blood since I was a kid. From grade school, I was in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Oh, really?
I could sing a few bars, but
Oh, please.
You let loose anytime you feel like it.
And from then on, I was pretty much hooked as an actor first and foremost, and then I ended up kind of going away from it, and then in high school, I was part of the Woodland Hills kind of debacle.
So you're a Pittsburgher then?
I am a
you're
Pittsburgh,
native.
born and raised here. Grew up in Edgewood.
Okay.
And then in, I guess it was 82 or 83, all the school districts merged and ended up at Swissvale High School, which
Right.
no longer exists as a high school. It's all one big Woodland Hills school, but my teacher, my homeroom teacher was the art teacher, Dan Riccabon,
Okay.
who I'll give a shout out to because he came in one morning swinging a rope and asked me if I wanted to be try out for the school musical Oklahoma. And it was pretty much history after that.
That would be a true cattle call.
That was that was good. Yeah, the cowman and or what is it? The whatever it is, the cowman and the farmer.
The cowman and the farmer should be friends. Yes,
yeah.
of course.
So we became friends, Mr. Rick and I, and ended up in that, and then all the school musicals from there on out, and ended up going up to school in New York. Started at a small school on Stagnant Island called Wagner College, which was really known for musical theater. Great school in that you got to really get your hands dirty right away, and they produced incredibly. It was a pipeline to Broadway. A lot of the actors there went on with great Broadway careers. And then I decided that I really was more interested in acting than I was in musical theater. I was a double threat. I just wasn't the triple threat.
You've become more than a triple threat. Yeah.
And
a
so
threat.
a threat nonetheless.
Some sort of threat.
A creative threat. So yeah, and then I traveled the world, and then transferred into NYU, where I got my degree in theater, and I have a degree in drama. Yeah,
I know many people that have degrees in drama that don't know anything
Just
about
look
the theater.
outside.
Yes, it's very dramatic.
That's right. So I have a degree in drama, and then I spent the next 10 years sort of as an itinerant actor up and down the East Coast, and kind of realized what I didn't want. What I realized is I was creating. I spent a lot of my early career working on new work, and it was something I was just sort of inherently drawn to.
Creating the new work yourself, or working on other people's new work?
Working on other people's new work. And through that experience, I realized that I was much more interested in being on the creative ground floor. And as an actor, you're really the last person invited to the creative
That's
table.
true. You have to make it yourself.
And
which is what you guys do.
Yeah, and I feel like, ultimately that's what drove me to the reality that the best way to do that was to create my own thing. And I always sort of wanted to come back to Pittsburgh. So it's funny. I left here thinking I'll never come back. And
you and me both.
And me.
And
you too.
Here we are.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
No.
Pittsburgh is a great place to do this kind of
It
thing.
really is. I don't have any regrets about coming back.
Well, that's good. And Tammy, where?
I'm originally from Cleveland. Don't shoot.
Close enough, but we won't hold it against you.
Yeah, thank you. But I love Cleveland. It's the place where I learned everything about theater. Where I fell in love with it.
They've got lots of great theater.
They have a lot of great. We had the oldest regional theater in the country with the Cleveland Playhouse, and I was really blessed as a child. I was one of those precocious kids that was always performing everywhere, out in the grocery cart. Telling jokes to the people in line. Dancing around. My grandmother was a pianist at a dance studio, so I got free dance lessons from the time I was 2. So I was always moving, and the truth is, I just never wanted to be me. I wanted to always be somebody else. It was just more comfortable for me to do that.
And have you become someone else?
I'm trying to get back to me. I have become a lot of people, and I'm finding that it's so much more peaceful just to be myself,
Sure.
And I think it took a long time. It took me 4 decades to really come around to that.
How wonderful is it that you have the ability to go and be someone else for a little while?
It saved my life to do that. I was good at school, thank goodness. I went to public schools in Cleveland. I was good at school and went to a school for smart kids, and they took us on a field trip, and I saw a play with kids acting in it, and it was at the Cleveland School of the Arts, and I said, that's where I want to go. And so 3rd grade, I auditioned to go to that school, and in 4th grade, I got in. I spent the next 9 years at that school. It transformed my life. I saw my first professional play in the 4th grade at the Cleveland Playhouse, The Effects of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds, and it changed my life because I was able to see myself on stage. I saw a mother with 2 daughters. That was my family, and I saw pain on stage but that darkness wasn't run from on the stage. It was really brought to light, and it also allowed me to see adults in a new way. I never saw adults perform before, and I didn't think it was something they did. To me, adults were like kind of sad, serious, hardworking, the weight of the world on their shoulders, full of troubles, and in pain. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be something other than myself, because what I saw, didn't make me excited about the future. And so,
even as a young person, you were looking down the road at what a screwed up place the world can be.
Yeah. I think it was, it was very present in my immediate environment, and theater was an escape for me. And so I spent all my time there. And, nobody in my family went to college. It wasn't even something that we thought about, talked about. There wasn't a lot of communication in my household. And so I got communication through theater. I got to say other people's words and, beautifully, learn about humanity, because people write about people. People write about relationships with people. And, I think acting is is sort of anthropological, the study of people in relationship to each other and to their environment.
And you're guaranteed responses, aren't you?
Gosh, I wish we weren't sometimes, but yeah, we react to each other. We bounce off each other. We are either, deflecting each other.
So let me be clear. I meant in the theater, when you have lines, you're guaranteed a response.
Yes.
In life, you're not.
You're right. Generally, the playwright writes the two characters talking to each other, or sometimes the monologue, the soliloquy to the world, help me. I think that's what we're all saying, help me in some way. And the theater did that. My ambition was just to be funny, just to have fun and to be silly with my friends.
Were you a funny kid?
Yeah. I mean, that was part of how I survived, I went to a lot.
The class clown?
I was. It was part of survival. I went to a school where a lot of people didn't look like me, and part of me trying to fit in was to make them laugh, to make them like me. That's the story of my life. Like me. Let me show you how many ways you could like me, kind of thing.
I think that's the way it is for a lot when in the theater, is it not?
Absolutely.
Well, there's that famous Laurence Olivier, Dustin Hoffman conversation when... it's, why do you do it? Why do you do it? And he says, look at me, 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 look at me.
Gosh, if that was the name of a book I wrote, the name of the book.
Look at me, look at me.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to be seen. I wanted to know that I mattered. And I think that when I saw that play in the 4th grade, I saw my life on stage, and I thought, well, I must matter somewhere if someone's going to write about me in some way. And I think that's so important, that people understand how much they matter. And in this world, we can be shown a lot of different things and not always that. So I had this wonderful, amazing series of teachers at the Cleveland School of the Arts. I'm definitely shouting that place out. It is my alma mater, my home, my birthplace. And one of my teachers, Jody Maley, she thought I should go to acting school. She thought I saw something in me and thought I should. And so she got the application from Carnegie Mellon, and she filled it out. And she was like, your audition date is this day. So me and a couple of friends made a trip over to Pittsburgh. I had no picture, no resume.
At what age?
I was 16. I had a monologue and a half. I wasn't prepared for this. I looked around at all the other kids that were there, and they had like headshots. I didn't even know what a headshot was, And I did my monologue and a half, and a piece from My Name is Alice, and a half a Shakespeare monologue, Queen Catherine from Henry VIII.
Do you remember who you auditioned for?
Yes. Barbara Mackenzie Woods and Don Wadsworth. And I left thinking, I don't really fit in there. Obviously I don't have all of the tools in my toolbox to be a part of that community. And we went back to Cleveland, and I didn't really think about it until a letter came in the mail, and that letter changed my life.
Where would we be without supportive teachers?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, that's where it really begins. Somebody
Yes.
recognizes something in you. You may have that spark within you, and unless you're extremely special, somebody else has to kind of give you a little bit of a push.
Yeah, or unless, I mean, it just wasn't part of the fabric of my family to think in that way. So I needed that. I needed somebody to reach their hand. I needed someone not to just reach their hand out, but to like do it for me in a lot of ways, you know?
To show you.
To show me, to put me there, to place me there, because I wasn't going to force my way into a space that I didn't feel like, I didn't even first of all know about, and then feel like, nah, I just not like them. You know?
So when you started to actually you did it here in Pittsburgh, right? You started to really do work. Is that you?
I went to Carnegie Mellon.
Okay.
I have to say, on the first day of class, I asked to leave because I was just culture shocked, and you know, I was so scared. You know, what I've come to realize how fearful I always have been. You know, and I was just so scared of not fitting in. 9 years of one school, I didn't have to make friends. It was just, this was a big family.
Sure.
You just are there and you're a part of it all. I came here and I just was placed into this world that was so very different from my home, surrounded by people that were so incredibly different, people from all over the world that were so incredibly different from me. And I didn't see a way in, and I asked to leave on the first day.
So this is interesting to me because this is part of what I consider to be the whole process, your whole life's process. What did you do what happened to cause you to overcome that?
Well, I went to the head of the department and I said, I don't think I belong here. And she said, oh, Tami, why don't you try it for one more week? And she was this English woman, Liz Orion.
I was going to say she's from Georgia, right?
And, you know, I love a challenge because I'm one of those people that are like, don't tell me what to do, tell me what to do. You know, I have this duality in me that, you know, I need that challenge. And so that was a challenge. And so I said, okay, I can try for another week. And, you know, somewhere in that week I realized, while I may not have the look that some people have, and I may not have the clothes or the family support, you know, I have something. This is what I'm supposed to do with my life. You know, I want to be on stage, and I have that. And I knew that was enough, and that I could fit in. I don't want to say the word compete, but it is a competitive space that we occupy. I could compete, and I could thrive if I really just spent time not thinking about the things that I don't have, but thinking about things that I do have, and which was this gift of storytelling, this gift of orating, this gift of speaking, this gift of saying text and connecting, and, you know, this ability to act. You know, I don't know why, but that's what I just felt that's what I wanted to do and can do. And so I thrived, and I left Carnegie Mellon. I graduated, and you know, when you're at that school, you sort of never leave that sort of safe bubble of that community. And I didn't really know what Pittsburgh was. I didn't really experience Pittsburgh in a real way, and so I kind of left. Middle fingers ablaze, like, I'm never coming back. You know, also I'd grown up in this Rust Belt community, and so I thought there's more out in the world, you know. And no matter where you go, there you are. So wherever I went, I was just going to be me, this Rust Belt kid.
So the world is very fortunate that you found your thing, even though you were resisting it at first, which I think is a common thread, by the way, that resistance to what we know how to do. We just, at first, we don't know it until something triggers to say, yeah, this is what I should be doing. And especially in the arts, which most parents want to dissuade you from. Because there's no money in it.
Right. I didn't have anyone dissuading me from it, but I also didn't have anyone pushing me towards it in any direction. And I don't think it was like I was resisting my talent or what I was supposed to do. I was resisting the big, scary world. And, you know, that's what scared me the most.
Would you say that the majority of the best work you've done has been the stuff that's most scary to you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's nice to be comfortable sometimes, but you don't really grow too much when you're in that warm, cozy space of comfort. You get to relax, you get to rest, and we need that. We need that space to really regroup and to heal. But really, you got to get in the arena.
Okay,
as they say.
so let's use that as a great opportunity to springboard into bricolage, which I think is exactly that. You do things that are unique, unusual, different. Certainly, they're pushing envelopes. They're giving the world something an experience we have not seen before. Okay, so bricolage, the word itself sort of means
making artful use of what's at hand.
Okay. So your mission, so to speak, is to go out and find things that are at hand and make things with that. Is that the mission?
Well, I think that is the way we approach the work that we do. It's not necessarily the thing that it's
not always literal.
Our process is to utilize what's at hand, but I think that what's at hand can mean a lot of different things for us, obviously. And I think that from a process standpoint, we have resolved to always be beginning, which is
that's interesting.
Yeah, which is,
you're always reinventing the wheel.
And I think that is our greatest strength. It's also a challenge for our staff and a lot of the people that are trying to pigeonhole us as one thing or another.
But it's not a weakness at all.
Well,
it's just difficult.
It's just difficult, and it is hold to the difficult, because I think that is where we challenge ourselves the most, to come outside of the traditional boxes we put ourselves in as artists, and I think that is what has led to our greatest successes. STRATA is a perfect example of that. When we went into that, we really had some general ideas of what we wanted to explore. Tami and I, as we've explained, have really come up as actors in traditional classical training programs, and then getting a taste of that, sort of what that meant from a professional standpoint in the regional circuit, and well-made plays where all the decisions are made for you as an audience member, and you come in and the question of what is it we're trying to get out of our audience. I mean, this notion of, when the audience leans forward in their seat, we want them to lean forward in their seat.
Or stand forward.
Well, stand forward.
Of your stuff, you stand forward.
Yeah, and I think, for us, traditionally speaking, that notion that this is a social art form, it's definitely from a creative standpoint. What starts as a one person alone in their room, writing a play, ends with the most social grouping of artists, from visual to performative, but from an audience standpoint, we started to be very dissatisfied with that relationship. From the fact that the audience, you're sitting in the dark, after all, next to a stranger that you never really talk to. But there is this sense of the monolithic nature of an audience, that it's a thing, and we talk about that as actors. We come off stage, that audience was...
Because you get to compare audiences. The audience only gets to compare it to itself.
And that's right. That's right. In fact, we were at the theater last night, and it's a Thursday night audience, we call them. There's
a little sleepier,
a little like,
still in the work week.
Yeah,
still in the work.
Still
week.
got to get home the next
tomorrow.
morning, get up for work, and so there's a characteristic of an audience, and then the other phenomena is you come off stage and. The audience is waiting for you in the lobby, and they say, you were great, you were this, you were that, the set was this, the set was great. we began to really think about how do we break down this homogeneity of an audience experience. So STRATA was our answer to that question.
Okay.
I mean, we really started about what if we gave each audience member a totally different experience, and then brought them back together and watched them sort of piece together this thing, so they couldn't bounce off whether, because a lot of times people don't know what they think, and so they look to each other and say, well, I thought what he thought, or another phenomenon is when you've been in an audience where one person laughs and it gives permission for
sure.
everybody to laugh, and then all of a sudden,
So they learn their behaviors from each other instead of what they're naturally feeling, and often it's hard for individuals to identify their feelings because we don't want to be responsible for those feelings. Like, I don't like this, but everyone else seems to like it, so something must be wrong with me if I don't like it. Like, how do we get people back to themselves and away from connecting how they feel with what everybody else is
Less
feeling?
peer pressure and more individual thinking.
Yeah, and that's scary for people,
Sure
and
it is.
scary for audiences, and not.
Because when you're in a crowd, you want to be a part of the crowd.
Absolutely, we want to fit in.
You do want to fit
we
in.
go back to that, but I think our process began a lot earlier and has organically grown over the years. We didn't jump into this with this idea in mind, and
well, we always wanted, as my bio so eloquently expresses it, we wanted to create this heightened sense of involvement. And for us, for me, early memories of going to the zoo and getting on the train and going around and sort of those things that happen on the side of the hillside, when you're on the train looking off, and these little, scenarios play out. It stuck with me from a very early age, and it was something that I was like, well, wow, if we could sort of get back to that, like, how do we create an experience for the audience that isn't so by rote? This is how we go in. We spend our, we get our tickets. We mill about in the lobby until we go in, and then the lights go out, and then the facade starts to happen.
But
and
we're
transport
always
us.
observing. As an audience member, you're always observing. You're not really a part of it. There is that fourth wall that separates us.
Sure.
And so, when we talked about when we, all of our birth of the company has just been born organically out of one thing from another. So, when I came on board to Bricolage, it was early days, and the company was a nomadic company doing one show a year, and every year they'd have to remind the community, here we are, remember us from 52 weeks ago when we did this show, and that, and then we were up for 3 weeks, and then we're down, and then we do the process all over again. And so we were continuing on in that way, and then a disaster struck, where a project we had in mind that we raised money for, that we were on the way to do, fell apart right in front of us. And the worst thing that could happen was that we couldn't do that project, and we had to return the money to the foundations, and they don't like that because they've already, written all of the reports.
Sure.
And,
It makes them look bad.
Yeah, it's just bad. And so we were given an opportunity, if we had a small window of time, can you write another proposal in a week, and we can see if we can adjust that funding so that you can keep it for a different project. So we scrambled, and that disaster gave Jeffrey and I this opportunity to say, what was problematic about the way we were doing things before, and how do we want to do things now? And what we thought was like, well, it's really hard to remain in top of mind of people and to become a presence on the landscape if you're only around for 3 weeks out of the year.
Very difficult.
And so we thought, well, let's take that same amount of money that we would get to produce one show and see if we can spread it out over a 6-month period. And that,
With one show or multiple shows?
so this birthed this something we called the Stage Reading Performance Series, where we would give a group of artists a week, and whatever they can come up with in a week with this script, they would present over 2 nights for free for an audience, and we'd have like a party. We'd have wine and cheese, and you'd come and you'd see this reading or staged reading, and sometimes they were full-on productions, whatever they can come up with in a week, and sometimes they were sitting in seats and just singing through an opera loosely based on Jaws, and and at the end of that 6 months, the audience would decide what show they wanted. They would vote, and they would decide on what show they wanted to see taken to full production next season. So we were able over that 6 months to do a variety of pieces, anything from Aristophanes to Stephen King. We were able to help our audience be flexible like we want it to be. We weren't just going to do new plays. We weren't just going to do classics. We weren't just going to do straight plays. We were going to do musicals too. We are dynamic individuals, and we are 2 separate people. Although some people don't think that. They think we're like the same thing and think the same and talk the same, whatever.
The terrible 2-headed monster.
Yes, that is, yes. But we were able to flex our creative muscles and give instead of 10 artists in one show, 100 artists in 6 different experiences, the opportunity to play and to risk their creative necks. And it introduced us on the landscape over a longer period of time. It connected us to our audience in a way that we weren't connecting before. We gave them some agency. We gave them a seat at the creative table. Mm-hmm. You tell us what you want to see. And inevitably, they picked the most difficult piece of the season.
Of course they did.
Yeah.
And dare I say that was I'm guessing was the first quote-unquote participatory experience where the audience was a part of it.
Yes, because early on, I came on board and, we were running this company together. We met while I was in New York. He was here. We did long distance for a little bit. And, I came here with no experience of any business acumen at all. I'm a theater I'm a theater
You mean
geek,
they didn't train you in business at CMU?
No. Not at that time. I think they've changed some stuff.
They do.
But no, they didn't at that time. And so I read this book called Mission-Based Management, and it gave us sort of this foundation of how we would spring forward. And it said, list 10 reasons why you are different from all like other organizations. And we could not list one.
Wow.
We were like, well, we do plays. No, a lot of people do plays. We do new plays. No, there's a company that does new plays. Okay, we're husband and wife. No, there's a husband and wife team already on the landscape here. Nothing. And so that became like, what can we do? And so that was sort of this driving force. How are we different? What are we doing that's not already here? And it sowed the seed for all of the choices that we would then make. And, we've always, like Jeffrey said, the mission of Bricolage was always a heightened sense of involvement for the audience. Mm-hmm. So the audience has always been incredibly important. So if they're so important, why do we ask for their money, put them in the dark, and make them clap for us when we're done? Can there be a different relationship? And so over the last, 15 years that I've been involved in 16, 17 years that the company has been around, this has been what we've been thinking about. What is our relationship to the audience? If they are that important, if they're so crucial to the scenario, to the equation of performing arts, what can we do to get closer to them? How can we connect with them in a deeper way? And everything we've done has been in response to that. And so our programming can look very disparate from the outside. You can go, well, they do something called wordplay, and then they do midnight radio, and then they do immersive theater. Mm-hmm. Well, they're just crazy. They just do too many things. But the thread running through all those pieces is our audience, mm-hmm. and how we're connecting to them.
And do you, I'm assuming you do some sort of research in terms of what the audience is actually responding to, and you have a pretty good idea of what the audience is responding to at this point, I assume.
Yeah, I think that our post-show surveys are very detailed. In fact, we adopted what we call an intrinsic impact survey, which is an idea that was developed through a study that was manifest in a book called Counting New Beans, where we're basically looking at, everybody wants to know about the economic impacts of art, but what are the intrinsic impacts? And so we are really interested in how we are actually impacting people. And we found that really immersive theater is the sort of what we're really driving toward now as a future. And that is work that really is about working with the audience, for the audience, about the audience.
Well, you guys are on the cutting edge of exploding everything that we've ever known about theater. I mean, from the Greeks forward, it's never been, other than, bread and circuses with Shakespeare, where they were throwing things at the performers, which I guess they still do to a certain extent. Did I just give you an idea?
Yes.
Throw things at the performers. I like that idea. It just depends what it is you're throwing.
I mean, that's been done. I mean, circuses and
Sure.
sideshows, that happens. There is a participatory. I mean, one of my favorite things, we had a dunking booth at our fundraiser,
I
and
know.
that's what I wanted for years. So that there we sort of got into that throwing things thing, But you can we now, because we have an incredible staff of people working alongside us at Bricolage, we're doing these, intrinsic impact surveys and fancy things, but how the audience feels. Like, you don't need a survey to know the tone and the tenor of the audience after a show. When something's working.
Have you gotten pretty good at telling when somebody's BSing you after a show?
Oh, yeah.
When somebody's just glad-handing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way it's set up. And
What is
I
set
think
up that way?
And I also think that there's not a lot of honesty that we don't have a system that is built for healthy criticism and critique and conversation around.
Oh, and that's getting much worse.
And it's getting much
Yeah.
worse.
We can't have
so we can't
discourse.
really say what we really think about things.
Well, I teach 18 to 22-year-olds every day. That's what I do for a living, right? I teach screenwriting over here at Point Park. And what we're seeing, we have a generation right now that everybody's good. Nobody can be criticized. And it's very strange how you try to get criticism in on someone that doesn't want to be criticized.
Yeah.
And that's what you're probably seeing to a certain extent.
Well, and we found that, it's through work with the audience, especially as an actor. I mean, you learn a show in front of an audience. There's no other way to learn it. You can make all the decisions you want, but until that audience is in the room and you're really starting to learn the show with an audience, that is the best teacher. And I think that, so, with our immersive work, for example, one of the things we do is we bring in an audience the very first day of rehearsal, often.
Really? First day of rehearsal?
Very first day of rehearsal, because it is so intimate, and because, your scene partner often, and you had mentioned that the playwright usually gives you,
Right.
the other actor on stage dialogue to respond to your, in this case, a lot of times the scene partner is the audience member themselves. So we want to, first of all, understand what it's like for an audience member coming in there to an unknown situation. And the only way to do that is to get an audience involved from the very beginning.
That is very interesting.
And then we begin to learn. I think that's another thing that came out of the stage reading performance series, where we learned how quickly we could get better. I think that there's so often this feeling of, we want to keep the audience out of the studio. We want to keep them away. We're not ready to show what we're working on.
That's the tradition.
Yeah.
And it's this studio practice where we enter into this, safe environment, and we get to ask all the tough questions and have all the fun, really. And then we, polish it up, and then we put it in front of an audience. And we were thinking to ourselves, well, listen, this is our favorite part of the process is rehearsing, where we get to ask all these questions and try different things. And so why aren't we letting the audience in on that? And so how can we do that?
So the audience is shaping your show along with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have to respect the audience. I mean, we cannot just respect them for the money that they pay for the ticket and their presence in the seat, perhaps they have something more to give. And this is an encounter that we're creating. It's a heightened encounter, but it is an encounter, and so you need the honesty and the trust of the other person to reveal something,
All right,
to create something new.
What we haven't discussed, even though it's kind of obvious, and maybe it's too obvious, is what is immersive and participatory, and how does that, what kind of shapes does that take? What is it, so that our listeners know what we're talking about?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that use that. It's a buzzword right now,
sure,
immersive theater. And so there are a lot of different ways that people go about defining that. And we have our own definition of it. And I think we say we put the audience at the center and we build the world around them, which they can explore.
But that takes different forms, obviously. And the 101 thing that we would say where we start is, who is the audience in this show? And a lot of work, whether it's, I think that the work that's most successful for us is when the audience understands who they are in the experience. So we have to cast them.
How do you do that? How do you cast the audience?
It's in various ways. DODO, for example, we created an organization called the National Self-Preservation Society, and you'll
have to forgive me. I felt like an idiot half the time. I loved it. I just absolutely loved it, but I giggled at least 3/4 of the way through DODO, and I felt like, what is wrong with me? And I wasn't trying to laugh. I just couldn't help myself.
Good.
So that just the beginning with the national. What did you say? Is it
the National Self-Preservation Society?
NSPS.
I just started laughing.
Yeah, and there is a sense of humor there, and ultimately we cast the participants as donors. They didn't quite know what they were donors for, and that was part of the experiences to sort of a self-revelatory process where you are asking these questions as you're going through. Okay, I'm a donor, but what am I going to be? Are they going to take an organ, or at some point, or? And you realize that you're actually a donor in this donor process by which, at the end of the day, you find out that you are, basically you are the specimen, that is being processed in this scenario. And that took place, of course, at the Carnegie Museums of Art and Natural History,
which was just a spectacular thing to do. And by the way, it was, I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes, and it was at least 2 or 3 days later when the word DODO just hit me as to what this was all the way. It was like, oh my goodness. How did you manage? You clearly could not have rehearsed for days and days and days in Carnegie Museum. So how did you arrange that? What was that process like?
Well, that was a 2+ year process of, first of all, identifying the decision makers over there, and then convincing them to let us do things over there that nobody's been allowed to do.
No, and really, like, you've got people running around with all this multi-million-dollar worth of art.
Yeah. And I mean, there's some funny stories around that, but it was definitely an experience where the mission of that organization really is to collect specimens and then preserve those things, right? And so when you talk to, it depends on who you talk to, right, over there, from the registrars who's frankly, if they had their way, nobody would ever come in there because, their goal is to do no harm, so anytime these works of art are pulled out of storage and placed in the light, they're degrading.
Sure.
And so there's this sense of danger for them anytime these things are moved or, displayed, and
they also have an on-stage and a backstage, which we got to go see, which blew my mind.
Well, and often, that's the story, right? They are spending so much time articulating and engineering the presentation of these artifacts,
right?
That the normal, or sort of the average everyday encounter with them in the style of the museum can be very off-putting, or for us, going to the museum and the gallery experience, the team that we put together with Gab Cody, our lead writer, and Sam Turek, our creative partner in these things. When we started, it took us. We did a year of a listening tour through the museum before we even.
How many times?
Well,
no, we
a listening tour would mean that we interview everybody we can get access to.
Working at the museum? Or
yes.
Working at the museum.
So we're not interested in laying our idea of something on top of something that already exists.
Right.
That's why it takes so much time. Because we're revealing things that are already there, and we're exposing things that people don't often get to see, and we're taking a traditionally curated experience, like traditional theater, very curated. All the decisions are made for the audience before they get there. You're just observing. Or what Jeffrey was saying, like they get to see what people want them to see. It's very curated, and we're sort of distressing that. We're turning it inside out, and we're seeing the seams, and we're revealing things. That kind of work doesn't just happen overnight, and takes trust. And trust isn't something you can buy. You have to earn it. You have to earn it, and you have to work for it. So these projects take so long because we don't waltz in there and say, we have an idea, and we're going to do this thing called DODO. We wait until what is supposed to be done there reveals itself to us after asking a lot of questions, talking to people, from people in security to people in maintenance to people in the registrars to people in the curators, and administratively as well. We want to see what the story is of this space.
Do you consider that this build-up process, do you consider that to be a part of your art?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
So you remind me very, very much of Christo. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because Christo spends years and years and years trying to get permission to do the crazy, unusual
beautiful,
things.
amazing.
And then what he does, which is what you do, so that's why you really are parallel, is the whole point of his art, which I think is really much the point of yours as well, is you go to a place that is familiar to you and never ever see it again the same way.
That was one of the goals. Exactly, that was one of the goals of the museum. How can people interact with the museum in a new way, in a way that?
Well, that's certainly what they were after, and I think that was something that we went in. We had, usually we come up with a set of, preliminary questions, or even words sometimes that we are, sort of exploring, and then through that experience. So for one of the things with the museum itself was this question of access. That was one.
Where
we
can
had
you go?
We had four A words really. What it came down to was access, authority. We started actually with the word authenticity. And, that question of authenticity, when you talk about art, or when you talk about a specimen, an artifact, what makes it authentic? And there's a word with the museums on the natural history side that is, it's the word holotype. And we toyed with the idea at one point, that was our working title of the show.
What is holotype?
So a holotype is the definitive specimen. And it's what every scientist is hoping to write the paper on, the definitive specimen.
So
it's
from which all others will be.
Got it.
And so, for example,
the
Carnegie Museum has the jawbone of the T-Rex. And so any jawbone that's found out in the field, they have to bring it to the Carnegie Museum
Really?
to authenticate it through that definitive specimen. And so, when you're talking about art and the definitive, the most authentic piece of art, and there's whole careers
whatever
that are
that is.
designed around this question of authenticity, and people get paid a lot of money to say whether something's authentic or not.
For sure.
And so this whole question of what is real, this whole question of reality, and so some of the most interesting things were when we were doing our listening tour was interviewing the conservators and the the people that were actually in charge of. So for one example, is they're putting together the woolly mammoth, and there's a whole school of thought on, there's the real bones, the bones that they have, and then there are the bones that are missing, and so they have to authenticate, or they have to replicate these missing pieces. And so they have to, their school of thought, the current school of thought over there, is that they want to do that in a way that doesn't make it so indistinguishable that the viewer would think that. So they do it in a way that the viewer can distinguish between the real bone and the bone that they create.
That they can or can't.
So that they can.
Yes.
Can distinguish.
That's the current. It used to be that they were trying to
Hide
fool
it,
us.
sure.
Right?
Perfection.
And so,
Sure.
and this, and that's on the natural history side. From the art side, there's a whole school of thought, and it varies from country to country, whether, the rules of engagement. So, for example, we walked into the conservator to interview the conservator, and they were working on the frame of a painting. They were restoring some damage that had been created, but they were doing it in a way that would work to do the repair, but not fix it in a way that you couldn't tell that it was broken.
You could still see
You
where the
could
repair
still
was.
see where the repair was, but it wouldn't draw your eye to it.
But if you were looking for it,
But if you're looking for it, you could see, it had been repaired there.
Huh.
So there's this whole very intricate school of thought about how that process is supposed to work so that we're not trying to fool people on so this whole question of authenticity and what is fake and what is real began to permeate our creative process, and it's something we're already interested in. From the beginning of our work, is to, what is real, and, how do we blur the line from reality and fiction?
well, I assume that's a big part of the immersive experience,
Exactly.
where when you go to the theater and you're an audience member in the theater, you are already unavoidably one step removed from reality. You've got this false thing in front of you. If you're at a movie theater, whether you're at a live theater, you have this fourth wall, as we've talked about, and that you're already one step removed. It's not real. But immersive can feel much more real, like you're in it.
You're still recreating a moment, though, and it begs the question about our entire lives. What is a real encounter? Like we have a lot of audience members that come to some of our programs and not others, and a lot of our audience that don't come to our immersive work and come to our other work say they're scared. I'm afraid. I don't want to be put on the spot, and I don't want to be touched, and I don't, they think it may be like a haunted house. So they have this preconceived notion about what it is, and they don't think that they could be a part of an immersive experience. And I always say, well, your life is an immersive experience. Did you wake up this morning with a script next to your bed on your nightstand?
I do.
Did you write it the night before too?
No, it just appears.
Someone is in control in that way.
It's the writer elves. They just show up.
Well, bless you, because that makes life a lot easier
I
when you
didn't
know
say it's any
exactly
good.
what to do.
It's all crap, but that's another story.
But we don't know what our life is going to be, and we don't know what the encounter with the barista is, but they have a script too. The barista has to perform. They can't just be in the mood that they're in and be like, what do you want? I'm not really feeling good today. They have to put on an energy. Hi, welcome. What can I get for you? I'm here to serve.
It's a mask.
We're all wearing masks
That's correct.
all the time,
Sure.
and so life is an immersive experience.
It's a cabaret, old
Oh, man, that's bad.
Hey, thank you.
So bad it's good. But, so this idea of what is authentic, we can explore that forever. We could break that down forever. And it kind of gets back to this idea of criticism and our inability to hold a conversation, a discourse about art in a way that doesn't keep that allows us to grow from it but doesn't destroy us. I mean, we're such fragile beings, everybody, but artists especially, because we are putting ourselves out there.
The word that I think gets lost most of the time is constructive. If you're having a conversation and the banter has to do with constructive criticism, not just mean-spirited, I hate this, but here's why and here's what it could be and so on. I think that's where people get lost in it, is that we've lost the constructive part of it.
Yeah,
Well,
but
and the
your version
real-
of constructive, like where you come from
Of course.
defines what you think is constructive
Of
and
course.
not. And you might come from a space that has nothing to do or no connection to what that other artist is putting forth. And your
well-
construction could be damaging.
Your audience is coming to it with whatever their life experience
Exactly.
is, and they're bringing that to the table.
And we have to be open and prepared for that. And so the actors the interactors, the actors that are a part of immersive theater are different from actors that do traditional theater. They have to be. They have to be able to hold space for whoever shows up in front of them and try without judgment to accept where they are so that there can be an encounter.
Do you have to train them?
I mean, training, we don't have a school or anything, but we talk about it. We that's why we have audience come on the first day.
But I also would say that the actors that have done this work are much more prone to be called upon again, because
That makes sense.
they often possess the understanding and the experience of holding space for people that are not scripted. I think that is the biggest fear. Obviously, it's if this then this. If this person responds this way, then you have to respond this way.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The actors you're talking about are doing what every actor, I think, has as an ideal, which is to be literally in the moment.
That's
That's
right.
exactly right. So when we get back to this question of authenticity, there's an inherent value statement put on that, right? When something is authentic,
Whatever that means.
we say, "Oh, that's good." When we say that person is authentic, we mean
Unless
that,
they're authentically evil, then we don't want that to be good.
but it's they are what they are.
Tammy's disagreeing.
I think they are what they are. I mean, I think there's something that is at least
Yeah.
it's not duplicitous. It's not.
Well, this binary of good and bad, like that child is throwing a tantrum. That is authentic for that child in the moment.
Sure.
Do we want that? No, not necessarily. But there is where that child is. It is about what you said before, like being present in the moment. That is the most difficult thing in the universe.
No doubt.
For any person, artist or lawyer or teacher, anyone walking down the street, can we be present for what is happening right now? Not what I want to happen, but what is actually happening right now. That is a challenge.
Spectacularly difficult.
And we ask our actors to try and do that, and they don't get the applause afterwards,
That's interesting. They don't really get the recognition.
No, but what you get is far more monumental and life-changing than just some simple applause. That idea that we talked about in the beginning, look at me, look at me, look at me, clap for me. That's so small. That's so egocentric because it's all about me, right? Something that happens in an encounter when you have connected with another human being and you know that they have been heard or have heard. Something happens that's more meaningful than applause.
We've had, and this is the difference. We say when we're, as actors, we came off stage and people are like, "Oh, you were this, you were that." Now we get, 14-page emails about I experienced this, and it was about me, and there's a shift that's happening, so that the audience member, it's a gift. I mean, it's a gift in a way that I've never I've never experienced in all of my days as an actor. That the audience feels so well cared for, that it truly is life changing, whether they're giggling all the way through it, because they're
Or
just
crying.
like, or, just because, wow, somebody took the time to figure this out for me, and they've allowed space, and there's a real sense of unknown when you go to immersives, because or at least the work that we do, there's this sense of, I have no idea what's coming next.
Well, you're unlikely to have read it in high school, right? It's going to be completely unknown to you. You're really taking a risk.
And getting back to this conversation about, not being able to critique people because they have, they do it right out of the gate and they have nothing to learn. There's a sense in our public discourse that we are coming at it from all that we know rather than all that we don't know, and so we're not learning anything. We've divorced ourselves from the mystery.
You say it's a lack of curiosity.
It's a lack of curiosity,
And this idea that we already have to know, that I have to have perfection, that I have to get it right. This again, binary narrative, where when we get something wrong or we change our mind, we're known as flip-floppers. We're not somebody that has had an experience that has taken what we thought we knew and shifted that, and now we think something else.
Well,
that's growth.
This idea of the confirmation bias that we especially now with our phones, every little alert on our phones it's confirming what we already know or what we already believe, or what our opinions, so that we can have more fodder for the people that we disagree with.
Yes.
And I feel like,
and more righteousness for where we stand.
these extremes of right and left, it's like the answer is always somewhere in the middle. It's about the conversation. We need each other from an evolutionary standpoint to further, our chances of survival. and
That's a tough one.
And that is a real tough one. And I feel like, through the process of DODO and all that we're listening to and hearing from the scientists in terms of where we are, and in essence, the institution of the museum itself is under attack, because it came to be through the patriarchal,
Elite.
industrialist, capitalist,
Andrew Carnegie?
Andrew Carnegie himself, who was, this privileged white guy who got to go all over the world and was like, well, I'll bring one of those back and I'll bring one of these back, and I'll be able to show, Pittsburgh for
putting other cultures on display. And when you only take a piece of a culture and remove it from the culture and put it on display, you're not getting the entire story.
Certainly
so
not.
So you think you might know, but you don't.
Well, part of what I think you're talking about has to do with the age-old issue of, as people go from children to adults, they lose the sense of play, and they lose the sense of what it is to be a child, and that the freedom to welcome in what adults think of as sort of delusion or illusion or whatever you want to think of it, but kids don't see it that way. Kids see their imaginary friends and so on. That's what you're getting.
Well, and getting us back to a place of curiosity about each other and asking authentic questions.
The lack of wonder.
Yeah.
And it does get back to when I was talking about my vision of what adults were when I was a child. It was something I didn't want to be, I mean...
Didn't want to be an adult.
Yeah, I didn't want that. That's not what you strive for. to live in pressure, to live in pain. Like the freedom of being a kid. Now, we can't do that because we have responsibilities that adults have responsibilities that kids don't have. But where is it that we lose the ability to play?
Yeah.
That we're allowed to, that we deserve that there is some freedom there.
Well, it seems like you folks have figured out how to get back to a big part of it. And I think part of what your message is that why don't we all get back there?
Yeah.
Well, in some way, I mean, I think that, we spend a lot of energy creating the boundaries, the playground through which, the artists that we assemble can play.
You're taking people back in, you're permitting people to explore again in ways that they haven't done for years and years and years.
We're asking them to be present with us in this moment
Mm-hmm.
and to be authentic with their response. And that's hard for people to do because we desperately want to get it right. And this is not about right and wrong. Your experience is your experience. What you bring to the table will reflect what you take from the table,
I think that's very profound. We have been going for a good hour and 5 minutes, believe it or not. And so we're going to come toward the end of the show here. And in your long experiences and doing what you've done, do you have a particular experience that you can relate to us that's either quirky or funny or offbeat or oddball or something unusual? I imagine you must.
Yeah. I had something in mind that I was going to talk about, but I feel like I had this experience in STRATA. I was a part of the creative team for STRATA, but as it happens a lot of the times when we build these things, we think so big and we build so much that I become part of the show in some way. And so I was a voice in the show, and I had my room, quote unquote, was a phone. And I was holed up in a dingy sort of room way in the back where no one could see me, and I had a telephone and monitors in front of me, and everything was surveillance.
Television monitors.
Yeah. Every part of the experience was surveillance, so we could see everyone for the safety of our actors and the safety of our patrons, and also as part of this sort of big brother kind of sensibility of what STRATA was. And so I would watch my people, the people I was assigned to connect with. And when they would come past this phone, I would ring the phone.
It was an old school phone booth that would ring when you walked past.
Yeah, it was like a superhero, a Superman phone booth. Mark Clayton Southers let us borrow it for this, and we had it inside the nurses' station waiting room. So when I would see my person come down the hall, I would ring it at the appropriate time, and if they didn't pick it up themselves, the nurse would be like, could you get that for me, one of the actors, and then that person would pick it up, and I would know their name right away, and I would say to them, oh, hi Steve, I'm sorry we got cut off earlier. And I would go into this voice, and they would be like, who's this? And I'd be like, oh, you're so funny. You know who this is. I miss you. I'm sorry I had to leave so abruptly, but I wanted to reconnect. And I would ask them about their first time.
Did you record these?
I'm not saying. But I would ask them in this way that would either totally offend them, and they would hang up on me. And then I could see them go sit down and kind of sulk and get very furious. That would make them giggle. That would make them question. Lots of things happened. So I had to be prepared for people to tell me things that I didn't necessarily want to carry, or like really sweet, funny stories, or for people to get very angry at me and call me a name and then hang up. And I had this one kid that picked up the phone, and he immediately was titillated. He immediately was like, I'm in. I'm totally in. I only had 3 minutes with everybody. They didn't know that, but I had this finite amount of time. And so we pretty much finished up what we were doing in about 30 seconds because he told me everything I wanted to know right away, And he was like, what do we do now? And I was like, I'm like in the back room, like by myself in this room. I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to do?
Oh.
And he was like, you want me to take my clothes off?
Oh.
And I was like, I'm in the back like, oh my God. And
Was
I'm
he
like,
alone?
Yeah, well, he
Or
was.
thought he was
I mean, he's in
alone?
a phone booth in a way, like a nurse's station.
But people can see him.
Yeah. People could walk by, could see him, and the nurse was right there. And I go, yeah. And I kid you not, within seconds, his shirt was off and his pants were around his
Oh, my
ankles.
goodness.
And I'm like, my heart's
He's like,
beating so fast.
Please don't send my girlfriend
Yeah.
in here. Please don't send
Yeah,
my
he was like-
girlfriend in here.
Yeah, he was with his girlfriend at this experience, and he was like, I hope, please don't let my girlfriend walk by. And I'm thinking like, dude, your girlfriend is here. What are you doing? But you just don't know. I mean, I don't know. And like, I'm like kind of left for like, this is going someplace so fast. I don't know I'm so far away physically from this kid. But so the nurse steps in and she's like, young man, put your clothes back on and get out of that phone booth, and yells at him. He puts his clothes back on and he leaves, and he's sitting there. And, that's the weirdest thing that I think I can tell that's ever happened to me. But this openness of, here we're offering something. I had no idea that would happen, but that is part of human nature,
Of course.
and we have to be open for that to happen. And
Speak about, look at me, look at me, look at me.
be careful what you ask for.
Exactly right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's. Do you have one?
Well, I mean, I think we'll stick with Strata just because it's one of those that's it was the very first one,
Yeah.
and what we were really
We
interested
learned a lot
in
since then.
creating this blurring the line between fiction and reality was one of the things, and so one of the taglines with Strata was you're still in the experience. and so that sort of the most obvious way that when you left there, you were still, when you left Strata, you were still thinking like, is this still part of it?
Mm-hmm.
So you
that's-
never,
Because it started outside.
That's insidious.
It started in the city, and
which
in
was
public.
exciting though
Oh,
for
sure.
people because they started looking at their everyday surroundings like all the possibilities
Of
here, and
course.
so you're sort of looking at it, the everyday through
and
this lens.
And if you've ever read 1984, you're really not sure, are
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Well, yeah, and we've done that
Yeah,
as
we
a
did that
midnight
at Midnight
radio show. But yeah, so in fact, one of the actors, this is my story. One of our actors who was in 1984, as a matter of fact, but he was also in Strata, and he was one of he was one of the agents we called on the outside. So there was a series, there was a series of gates, really, that you would go through. You would start on this old defunct bus stop on the corner, and you were instructed to look for the gentleman with the red hat and ask him, is this the bus to eye consciousness? So Strata was a strategic training, research, and testing agency for this corporation called GATE. And GATE's, their product was eye consciousness with the little I. And the only way to achieve eye consciousness was to go through Strata and be refitnessed. And it took place at a former Bally's Total Fitness, which was 24,000 square feet. It was a huge...
You're on
but-
6th, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would show up at this defunct bus stop in the middle of town, and through a series of agents, they would lead you to this alleyway in this metal door and a brick wall, and you would enter, and your experience would begin, and you'd show up, and so this one particular actor was 2 years later, after the experience was over, was in line at the grocery store. And he heard these two ladies in front of him talking about Strata. And he couldn't believe it that they were still talking about it after 2 years. They were just recalling how just incredible it was, the experience of really not knowing when it was over. And he leaned over and he said, "You're still in the experience."
And laughed.
And then he just walked out.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
We never got to hear how that sort of landed, but I can only imagine that was one of
But
these.
that's part of it. We don't get to hear, because there's no applause. We don't get to hear what people are actually, how it's affected them, unless they write to us. So largely, we're sort of sending this energy out into the world, and people are capturing it in the way that however they want to, and we don't really know. Unlike,
And I'll leave on one other story that's very similar to that. I am, one of the things that I do for sort of sanity's sake is I do a lot of camping, and a lot of solo camping. I like to get out into the woods by myself and just be quiet. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I do to get out when nobody's out there is go winter camping. So I am out in the woods, and it's just about dusk, and I'm all set up, and I got my fire going, and it's winter time, and so you can hear for miles around. It's very still and quiet. Nobody's out there. And all of a sudden, I hear these footsteps in the snow. And I'm thinking to myself, who the heck is out here? And I can't see them. They're sort of around the bend, and they're getting closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, into view comes this couple. And this woman is sort of walking in front, taking the lead, and she starts approaching my camp. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what is happening, So I kind of walk toward them, to kind of protect my camp and just be like, can I help you with something? And she says, "Oh, I'm just so interested in, the fact that people are out here, and I just wanted to see what your setup is like. How are you, And so I sort of invite them into camp, and this guy that's coming behind her, he looks at me, and he says, "You're God." And I'm like, we got, what have I done? I look at these people.
This is how it ends.
I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he said, "You're from Strata." And I was like, "What?" And this is 4 or 5 years later.
That's
right?
hilarious.
And I said, "Yes." And he said, because I was the last person people would see when they came out. And they would come through, the tunnel of light that would lead them back to the bar, which was where they met the rest of their team, the people that they came with. And I was there waiting for them, And I would always ask how their refitnessing experience was. And they'd come out of the tunnel, much to like those airline security gates where you have to put your hands up and
Sure.
they blow air on you,
Right.
So you sort of come through that experience. The door opens and your theme song is playing. And people would often get very overwhelmed by that moment. And I would be there and sort of ask them questions and give them a beverage of their choice, and they would sit and decompress as they waited for their partners or their friends to come through to meet them. And so he recognized me from that moment. And but that was one of the
called
most...
you God.
And called me God. And I was totally freaked out by it. And so it was sort of a reversal of, where
immersive
I was put
experience.
back into the experience that I created, it was pretty off-putting and wonderful, actually.
I don't think you can find too many people in the theater that can have these experiences. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have one particular piece of advice or a tip for anybody that's starting out, either in this type of business you're in or some other part of the theater world, that might help them to get a little further down the road?
I think about like what what I wish I was told, what my little self from 20 years ago when I was first, entering into professional theater world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I would have been able to hear it, but I'll just say it anyway. Well, something someone did say to me was, have patience. And I wasn't able to hear that. That sounded like, just wait. But what I would say is, have humility.
Humility.
Yeah, like be able to learn. Always be learning. Be curious. Be honest about who you are and where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like be kind. Listen. Don't wait for the invitation to create.
That's a big one.
Develop your voice. Laugh. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
This is about humility, like it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to fail. It's actually great to fail.
That's a frequent theme on things on the people say on the show, which is that it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
That in
It's
fact
necessary.
that's what you learn from.
Yeah, it's necessary.
Otherwise, you get nowhere.
Yeah.
George Bernard, I've said this quote before. George Bernard Shaw's famously said, "A man who makes no mistakes makes nothing at all."
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
you go.
Well, it's that phenomenon while you're writing, where you write the same sentence over and over and over and over again to get the perfect sentence, and you never get to the paragraph.
It gets worse if you work in, as I did for 20 years, in the commercial world of writing in Los Angeles. You wind up 10 years in going, I've written this story before, and you're just rewriting the same story over and over again because that's what you're about,
Yeah.
So I think that's very valuable. Jeffrey, do you have a separate piece of advice?
Well, I mean, I think that it's sort
Don't go out in the woods alone.
No, definitely go out.
No,
in the woods.
definitely.
I just think that one of the things that I learned early on is that things take 3 times longer than you think they're going to take, and that the 10 years is nothing when you're talking about something like art. These trees that surround us, the big oak tree. It takes a long time.
Decades.
Thousands
of years. Sure.
I think that we live in an age where everything is so immediate, and we think we know something because we've seen it on our phones, a picture of it, or, and that, I just would say, to sort of echo what Tami said, is patience. And then the thing that I always say for us, and as a reminder, is that always be beginning, and I'd say those are my 2 caveats.
I would say that all of your advice was just really right on the money for what people need to hear, and very, very challenging for people to hear. As Tami said, she wouldn't have heard this advice when she was a young person, but I think it percolates in. It seeps in.
Yeah.
And I think that people need to hear it, whether they accept it for now or not.
Yeah.
Well, this has just been a great hour and 22 minutes, believe it or not. And I really thank you both for coming in today. It's been a great pleasure.
Well, our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for having us. We appreciate it.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great episodes to you. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.